You say we own it. We don't own it. Who does?
Well, a conglomeration, I guess, of a number of companies from across the world, including publicly owned companies in other countries. It's quite important that we kind of put this in context. Last year, the rolling stock companies, that is, the companies that own the trains themselves, who then lease them to the operating companies, paid out almost 410 million pounds in profits to their shareholders. We lose about a billion and a half every single year as a result of privatization, whether it's in the form of dividends or as a result of the waste due to fragmentation. And this is money that we could be putting back into the system to cut rail fares for people by an estimated 18%. So it's quite incredible that this system has been allowed to continue for this long. And obviously, we know that the public has always opposed this, but with Martin Lewis raising the alarm recently, it looks like everyone is talking about this issue now, and I think it's for a good reason.
Well, the public hasn't always opposed it. Not everyone is talking about it like you, John Bosco. A lot of people will be old enough to remember British Rail, and that was pretty uncomfortable to travel on. So there have been successes of privatisation. A lot of people have been supportive of things happening on the West Coast Main Line, for example. So it's not entirely everybody is against this.
I think that it's quite important to also try and put that into a bit of context. So I mentioned a moment ago the rolling stock companies, they're called ROSCOs in short, who made 410 million pounds in profits last year. The average train that runs in our railway system right now is about 20 years old. I imagine that given the narrative that's been put forward in the press for a while, you would imagine that the average train during the former dispensation when it was in public ownership was much older than that. Then it was 16 years old, 4 years younger than the average train in our system. It's not at all surprising that our trains are arriving later, are breaking down more frequently, and are being so chocked full of people with very few toilets, for example, which was what Martin Lewis was complaining about. It's really, really important that in this context, we also understand that the government themselves, this conservative government over the last 13, 14 years, have been taking a lot of these private companies back into public ownership because they just cannot manage to leave them in private hands anymore. So there's not been the kind of vaunted success of the private sector. The other countries that run their railway systems in public hands have far more success. Switzerland has the best railway system in the world. It is a publicly run, publicly owned system. We can do it here. We just need to kind of make the political choice to do it.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people will refer to Switzerland, famous for its railways, of course, but also famously a very expensive place to live. Are we just going to have to pay more in taxes to get what you want, which is better run publicly owned railways?
Not at all. It's quite interesting because obviously you point out the Swiss tax system. In the UK, we actually have the most expensive to use railway system for passengers. If you decide right this moment that you need to travel from, you're in London, so you want to travel to Sheffield, it's going to cost you far more than it would cost somebody in Switzerland to travel that exact distance. So it's quite incredible that obviously they pay a lot in taxes. We happen to not pay as much as they do in taxes, but we pay far more on our rail system. It just does not make sense. We only campaigns against private privatization of our rail system because we believe it's what's best for passengers. It's also what's best for the climate. And of course, we don't just complain about it. We've pushed the government over and over again. And if people want to join that fight, they should find us.
John Bosco, let me finish off by asking you, a lot of people who are campaigning against privatisation do so in those areas where there is no competition. If you take that train from London to Sheffield, we don't really have much choice. And it's the same with things like water. You can't choose where the water comes from that comes out of your tap. Do you sense that a lot of people are on your side with this kind of thing?
Absolutely. Our latest polling finds that almost 70% of the public supports public ownership of rail. And it is a fact that a lot of people don't actually think of the railway as an area in which there exists a choice. They want to go from point A to point B, and they'll take the train that's going from point A to point B, or whatever connection takes them to point B. So it's quite important that we understand that there is no market in the railway system. And just like water and just like a number of other of our public services, there is no market. The market that has been imposed on the system has manifestly failed over the last 30 years. And it's time for common sense to be restored and for our railway systems to be brought back into public ownership.
John Bosco Nwobo, thanks very much indeed for joining us from Oxford, avoiding getting the train to London to chat in person a bit cheaper.